Political science from a Catholic perspective. The study of politics has been categorized as a science. As a science, it can be understood as a modern, quantifiable science that is defined by the systematization of data after observing, studying, proposing hypotheses, testing hypotheses, and verifying results. Political science also can be understood as a practical science that deals not only with exact quantifiable data, but human qualities that are never exact, but more or less so. In addition, in accordance with the classical understanding, the study of politics studies the essence of politics. In other words, it studies those aspects of politics that are stable and persist throughout history despite historical change. In this sense, one embraced by Aquinas, a science is the ordering of knowledge that is gained by demonstrating conclusions from certain premises. One example of certain premises within the science of politics is the natural moral law. Today, political science has many specialties that bring about with greater clarity various ways it is a science. These include political theory, government and politics, comparative politics, international relations, political economy, public administration, and public policy. This textbook, with a special emphasis on U.S. politics, will introduce students to the study of politics as a social science according to the above categories. A philosophical dimension, resonant with our Catholic faith, will also be integrated within this social science approach. Lecture 1, Introduction, the Study of Politics. Three basic concepts underline all politics: power, unity, and justice. Power enables political authorities to maintain unity in society by safeguarding it from breaking apart. If the means political authorities use to safeguard the unity are in accordance with natural law, then power is being exercised justly. If not, then unjustly. Individual good and common good. We study politics both out of self-interest, or concern for individual well-being, and for the common good. From a Catholic perspective, which presumes we are social creatures, self-interest and concern for the common good can never properly be separated from one another in a dualistic manner. As Catholics, we are to live upright, moral lives, regardless whether we are acting publicly as a politician or as a private individual in the context of family life. Being moral means being relational. That is, being concerned for the well-being of others and not simply for my own well-being. The building blocks of politics. First, what is politics? What does it mean? Politics comes from the Greek word polis, which means city. For a city to exist, there must be rulers. For there to be rulers, there must be a process by which rulers are appointed, elected, or at least acknowledged. The authority a community recognizes in its rulers allows the rulers to make decisions that will affect individual and common good. When there are conflicts caused by the pursuit of various goods, the rulers are expected to reconcile the differences and maintain unity. Political leaders maintain unity by the exercise of power, which essentially is the ability to influence and/or control human behavior. When human behavior is controlled by coercive means, hard power is being exercised. In contrast, when human behavior is influenced by persuasive means, soft power is exercised. For political leaders to maintain their power, it is helpful, but not absolutely required, for their rule to be considered legitimate. Once rulers lose legitimacy, there is usually a greater tendency that either they will not be voted back in, presuming the governing model is a democracy, or they will be overthrown. Rulers who uphold principles of natural law, reflected in the Ten Commandments, are often considered legitimate but not always. Those who uphold natural laws, including of course the right to life from conception to natural death, are just rulers. Those who do not are, generally speaking, unjust rulers. Why are there political communities? Social contract theory. One explanation why political communities exist is called the social contract theory. We will reflect on two presentations of this theory. The first comes from Thomas Hobbes and the other from John Locke. Thomas Hobbes lived from 1588 and died in 1679. He was an English philosopher and a social contract theorist. He maintained that all political communities are artificial. Man only agrees to live in a community out of self-interest, according to Hobbes. This means, argues Hobbes, there are no natural moral laws that man is accountable to. In England, Hobbes, backed by the ruling Stuart kings, whom he saw as enforcers of peace. One way he defended the kings was by developing a theory of absolute power in his book Leviathan. As presented in the Leviathan, a king derives his power not from God but from the competing interests of men. In this book, Hobbes depicts man as acting like a machine driven by self-preservation. In the state of nature which exists before a political community is formed, all men, driven by self-preservation, are at war with one another. According to Hobbes, in this natural pre-state condition, the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And I provide in the transcript key excerpts from the Leviathan by Hobbes on the natural state of war, or what he claims is our natural state, which is war. John Locke. John Locke lived from 1632, died in 1704, was also an English philosopher. He, like Hobbes, but with a difference, viewed political communities as artificial. According to Locke, although the political order is artificial, it is entered into to preserve natural rights, life, liberty, and property. Human nature for Locke, in contrast with Hobbes, is selfish, but, and this is where the difference comes in, reasonable and tolerant. The phrase life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the American Declaration of Independence very likely is traced to Locke's theory of rights. Jean-Jacques Rousseau lived from 1712, died in 1778. This Genevan philosopher, in contrast with Hobbes, had a romantic notion of the state of nature. According to Rousseau, there are three basic stages in human history: the brute, the savage, and the civilized. He upheld the savage middle stage in human history as the ideal one. In this state, Rousseau contended, man still had uncorrupted morals. By standing between the brute animal-like stage and the decadent civilization phase, the savage stage shared the best of both worlds, and he writes this: nothing can be more gentle than he in his primitive state, when placed by nature at an equal distance from the stupidity of brutes and the pernicious good sense of civilized man. One reason why Rousseau idolized a supposedly properly less state of man that existed prior to civilization was that he rejected Catholic doctrine of original sin. According to Rousseau, and I quote from him, "Let us lay it down as incontrovertible rule that the first impulses of nature are always right. There is no original sin in the human heart. The how and why of the entrance of every vice can be traced. The only natural passion is self-love or selfishness taken in a wider sense. This selfishness is good in itself and in relation to ourselves. And as the child has no necessary relations to other people, he is naturally indifferent to them. His self-love only becomes good or bad by the use made of it and the relations established by its means. Until the time is ripe for the appearance of reason, the guide of selfishness, the main thing is that the child shall do nothing." This is interesting. This is what he recommends. "The child shall do nothing because you're watching him or listening to him. In a word, nothing because of other people, but only what nature asks of him. Then he will never do wrong." So just leave your children alone. Don't correct them. Don't watch them. Don't listen to them because they have all these natural impulses that are good. And if we just let the child be, he will never do wrong. That is a result, that is pedagogy, a result of his rejection of original sin. St. Thomas Aquinas. Hobbes, Locke's, and Rousseau's concept of human nature and political communities differs substantially from the great Catholic saint and doctor of the Church, St. Thomas Aquinas. Contrary to Hobbes, and in part Locke, Aquinas did not perceive political communities as artificial. Instead, according to him, a good that humans are naturally inclined to is to live in society. As Aquinas states, man is a civic and social animal. In addition, for Aquinas, injustice within political societies is not an indication that the political society itself is artificial, but rather is an indication of man's tendency to sin. Man sins when he pursues goods only out of immediate self-interest, without concern of the common good that we participate in. Aquinas identifies this excessively selfish tendency of man with original sin. According to this doctrine, we all have sinful tendencies within our hearts and minds. These sinful tendencies, though, do not so overpower us that we are completely corrupted and incapable of pursuing good in a just manner. Instead, argues Aquinas, the human attraction to good has been distorted, but with the help of grace in cooperation with man's efforts can be gradually healed. Basic Concept 1: Democracy. Throughout history, man has naturally developed different types of government that can be boiled down to rule by one, rule by few, or rule by many. Each of the three can be lived out well or lived out perversely. The model that those living in the U.S. are most accustomed to is rule by many, also known as a democracy. U.S. democracy is this distinct type of democracy called a representational democracy. It is not a direct democracy. In a direct democracy, all the citizens are responsible for judging, legislating, and executing laws. In contrast, in a representational democracy, referred to as a republic from the Latin meaning things belonging to the people, elected representatives judge, legislate, and execute laws. One of the oldest forms of direct democracy occurred in Athens, Greece, around the 5th century BC. One of the oldest forms of representational democracy was the Roman Republic that lasted from around 509 BC to 27 BC. The Romans' complex system of democratic representation influenced how the U.S. developed its unique form of representational democracy. And in your transcript, I provide you with key excerpts from the Histories by the Greek historian Polybius, who lived from 200 BC and died in 118 BC. And in these excerpts, Polybius describes the Roman Republic, and he separates different types of political power from one another in a similar, but of course different way that the U.S. divides its powers. The U.S. founding father, James Madison, looked to the Roman Republic, as described by Polybius, for inspiration and guidance. Madison was the 4th president of the U.S. He helped to write the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. Bill of Rights. For this reason, he is considered the father of the Constitution. Madison rejected the political model of a direct democracy, lived out by the Athenians during the 5th century BC. Instead, he advocated a representational democracy. According to Madison, a direct democracy, besides being impractical in governing a vast territory with many people, lacks important checks and balances that a representational democracy has. And I include in your transcript an important excerpt from Madison on these points. Basic Concept 2: The State. We so often hear the word state that we might think we know what it means without actually having a clear grasp of its meaning. For example, what is a sovereign state? Most define a sovereign state as specific territory that is administered by one government with the power to make and enforce laws. According to this definition, the Vatican City state ruled by the Pope qualifies as a sovereign state. But is it a nation state? What is a nation state? A nation state is a sovereign entity in which a dominant group of people share some important characteristics in common, such as a common history, racial makeup, ethnic traits, religion, language, and even commonly held assumptions about politics and economics. It is possible for a nation to exist apart from the state. For example, a Native American tribe might define itself as a minority nation of distinct people who share a common background, common geographic location, a core set of beliefs who are living in the nation state of the USA. When there does not exist a dominant group of people who provide a sovereign state with a common national identity, it is often referred to as a polyglot state. A polyglot state is a sovereign state that contains multiple major national groups. Examples of polyglot states include India, Nigeria, Russia, and China, as well as the former Yugoslavia. Finally, it is possible for there to be a stateless nation. People who belong to a stateless nation are those who have a common identity, as defined previously, but do not have a land they can call their own. The Jewish people prior to 1948 were such a people. Currently, the Palestinians are a stateless nation. How to study politics, political science, political philosophy? In the preface, I explained that the study of politics has been categorized as a science. As a modern science, it systematizes data gathered after observing, studying, proposing hypotheses, testing hypotheses, and verifying results. The subjects that are studied can be a government, various governments, comparative politics, relation between nations, international relations, and governmental administration, or public administration. The scientific component of studying politics can also be understood in the classical sense as a practical science that deals not only with exact, quantifiable data, but human qualities that are never exact but deal with something that is more or less. Studying politics in this manner can be described as approaching politics from a philosophical perspective. Currently, politics is studied both from an empirically scientific manner and from a philosophical classical scientific approach. Which methodology do you prefer? Do you prefer the philosophical approach, or are you more interested in employing the modern scientific method when studying politics? Is this methodology problematic, especially when the subjects being examined are human beings with a free will? Can this approach to the study of politics lose sight of human political norms that we can obtain with our intelligence that exists regardless whether the majority is following them or even supportive of them? The notable Greek philosopher Plato promoted the normative and philosophical approach to politics. In his Republic, he asked a number of questions. What constitutes the good life? What is a good government? What is justice? All of these questions presuppose the existence of norms that are not determined by a current dominant form of human behavior. God bless.